It's the Brad and John Show.
It is the Brad and John Show, and today's date, I should say, is December 5th, 2024. This is the A block, which means we started it just after 7 o'clock. And John, you know why I do that, right?
Why do you do that, Brad?
Because of the fact that there are people that listen to us live, 7 to 8 o'clock every morning, Monday through Friday. But a lot of people listen on the podcast that you can get at bjshow.co, or they listen to the podcast video that is on bjshow.video that's hosted on YouTube, and it's actually as a video. And as a reference, sometimes we talk about people might be curious as to what we're talking about as far as date-wise concerned, as if things we talk about have just happened yesterday, a week ago, whatever, stuff like that. So
I thought you meant, why do we get together at 7 a.m. 5 days a week? I thought you were asking an existentialist question, Brad. You said, why do I do that? I'm like, I don't know, Brad. Why do you?
John, you're way above my pay grade. I don't think like things like that. I just wonder, okay, it's 10:30. Where's the closest drive-through that I can have lunch at? You know, that's my life. You know what I'm saying?
I hear you, Brad.
Okay. John, every single day of his life for 23 plus years, this guy is a machine. He grinds out, I shouldn't say he grinds out, he carefully crafts a website called johncombest.com, C-O-M-B-E-S-T, johncombest.com. And in that website, every single day, he has numerous interesting stories, not great, bink, with pictures and stuff like that. It's a link. It's kind of like a Drudge Report of the state of Missouri. You click on the links, and then you find out what's behind the story. John, certainly, would the word be titillate you by the headlines? Is that sort of what you're doing?
Oh, Brad, a little Tawdry Hepburn over there. Sure, they're quite titillating. And some of them are so glittery that I'd even refer to them as glitterous.
I'm not going to touch that. Okay, we bring this guy in every morning.
I'm Casey Kasem.
And he starts off with...
In third place...
A piece of news that hits close to home, Brad. The news originates from Kansas City, and I got this from KCTV via the great Tony Bateo at Tony's Kansas City. And it has to do with St. Louis because there's a group that's centered on both Kansas and Missouri. They have a clever name, Brad. I want you to spell it out in your head while I read it, okay?
Go ahead.
Casino Employees Against Smoking Effects. What does that spell, Brad?
Cases? Casino employees?
Cease.
Cease. Okay.
Let's cease smoking, Brad. And their point is, if you're going to the good old Hollywood casino, right there off of 141 here in the beautiful St. Louis area, or you're going to a casino over in Kansas, Brad, you go, you shoot some craps, you sit with the other geriatrics and you pull a lever and you win once every 200 pulls, and you come home and you smell like cigarette smoke. You smell like funk, probably a little bit of desperation, probably a little bit of credit card debt, and also you smell like smoke. And these folks, these casino employees say no more. There's no reason why it's almost 2025 and casino workers have to go to a casino and come home smelling like smoke. So, Brad, they're pushing in both Kansas and Missouri for legislation that bans smoking anywhere on a casino floor and a casino facility on casino grounds. Now, Brad, I went to the Missouri legislature's website and I looked at the pre-filed bills this morning, and it could entirely be user error on my part, but I wasn't able to find the sponsor. They say they have legislation in Missouri to do this. I wasn't able to find it in Missouri, but I'll spend some time on it and find it. Maybe we can, I can do that as a correction tomorrow. But anyway, Brad, yes, cease. And they plan on annoying legislators, or I should say they plan on having some sort of event at the Capitol on February 3rd to talk about how important it is to eliminate all smoking from Missouri casinos.
Now, let me ask a question or so. The casinos were carved out of the no smoking ban years ago when they put that in statewide, correct?
I guess so. That would have been, so I believe that passed in 92 because I wasn't involved yet in campaigns. I think it was 92 it passed.
Right. And it's just like the gun law with the concealed carry. There are certain places you can't have your gun. You can't have it in a church or a school or stuff like that. But they did the reverse where they essentially said you can't smoke here, but you can smoke at the casinos, which essentially is what they did, right?
Yeah. And what I think is strange about this request is that if you want to smoke at a casino, Can't you just go out on the deck of the riverboat? Like, from what I remember reading, every casino is on a river, and then, or maybe it's just a body of water. But can't you go out, and won't the stiff winds from the Missouri and Mississippi River blow the smoke away, Brad?
John, and you haven't done this in a while, but you being a single guy, let me give you an idea. Very romantic. You're exactly right. You could take your date and go onto the bow of one of the casinos, and you could hold her up like in Titanic, and you could have this terribly romantic moment as you stand on the bow of that boat as it plies its way down the Missouri or the Mississippi. Oh, hold on a minute. They're not boats anymore.
They're not. By the way, I'm glad you went the Titanic route, because I thought you were going to say throw the broad overboard and get the insurance money.
No, that's a different movie, but we won't talk about that. See, what I find interesting about this is there's some mastermind, and not this deal, but deals like this, there's some mastermind somewhere who wakes up and says, we're going to do this with casino workers, because I've heard this exact same story in Atlantic City. They're going through the same thing in Atlantic City right now.
Yeah. And so what I didn't get from the KCTV story is usually when these so-called groups are manufactured by a union or something, it's pretty easy to spot because they have a lot of pre-printed signs and they have people that are obviously fed talking points. It could be that this is actually just a group of folks who doesn't want to come home smelling like cigarette smoke.
Well, see, that's always the interesting thing. You brought up the point. It's like when the $15 minimum wage first hit, you saw these people show up at McDonald's, and they all had like the printed signs. Okay, who did that? It's not like
it's well, I mean, it's obviously the unions, but then they talk about a grassroots movement. It's so silly.
Well, in B Block. Can I tell you an interesting story that I personally was sort of involved in involving the American Cancer Society, which to this day still bothers me because of the fact that it was totally untransparent as what the American Cancer Society was doing. And
let's talk about that in B Block. Brad.
Okay, and once again, don't get me wrong. I'm an anti-smoking kind of guy, but by the same token, I'm a libertarian that to the point where, like, the idea of your right to swing your fist ends the tip of my nose. Well, your right to smoke ends the tip of my nose, and if I can smell your smoke, I don't like that. So you should be farther away. But I'll tell you the whole goofy story. Okay, we done with that one?
We are.
Number 2.
Up a notch to number 2.
Missouri's U.S. Senator Eric Schmitt has been making the rounds, Brad. He was on the Ingram angle, once again on Fox News. He was on The Lead with Jake Tapper on CNN, on the Communist News Network, the China News Network, the Clinton News Network. Yesterday, talking to Jake Tapper, he was asked mostly, Brad, about things like Pete Hegseth. He's asked about China. He's asked about Doge. I would point people to just one piece if they want to get a broad overview of everything. Schmitt was on with Mark Reardon yesterday, Brad, and I have a link up to the Apple Podcast link. And as always, I recommend you can go in, and if you don't want to listen to it, just click on transcript and you can scroll through and see what the senator had to say about these issues. Particularly, Brad, he's saying that he's sticking with Pete Hegseth. I have a problem saying that last name for some reason, and maybe I have some sort of a speech impediment. But he's sticking with Pete, and Pete's been under fire for, I guess, stories about not only women, but stories about him drinking. And, and especially the story yesterday about the rumors that Trump is considering Ron DeSantis if Pete doesn't work out. So I would suggest folks go check out the transcript with Reardon. And Schmidt's been all over this. I should point out, too, that the defense secretary will go through Schmidt's committee, which is the Armed Services Committee in the Senate.
Plus his mom got into the action. Did you see that or hear that?
Oh, I thought you meant Schmidt's mom.
No,
I saw that. And from what I saw, the headlines, I didn't watch it. But from what I saw, people, quote unquote, critics were saying that maybe his mom didn't help him in this.
Well, I don't know. It revolves around the fact that apparently once upon a time when Pete was having some marital issues, she either sent him a text or an email or a letter or something like that. Essentially, she was upset with him that he was not living his life properly, yada, 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 yada. Matter of fact, I opened up in my drawer of my letters from my mom, and I've got about 40 of those letters, but that's a whole other story. But I don't know. I sort of feel sorry for the guy because I think this is one of these situations where he's being piled on. If you've heard, and I'm not defending him, don't get me wrong in that respect, but the interesting thing that came out about it, they say there are these Fox insiders who come forward and said that he's drunk on the air and he had a flask with him when he was in the Fox studios. And yet there's a bunch of current Fox people that came out and said, look, we worked with this guy for a decade. We never saw him once, drunk.
Yeah. And not to interrupt, but I heard he said pretty much the same thing on Megyn Kelly's show. He's like, look, nobody has ever even approached me and suggested that I ever had a drinking issue.
Right. And it's one thing, this, John, from working with people that you work with corporate-wise. They're people oh my God, this guy's got a weed problem or this guy's got a drug problem.
For sure.
I mean, everybody knows that. It's to the point where it's like the whole thing in schools where they talk about we're not going to give grades anymore because we don't want to make the students in the class who are not doing as well as the smart kids feel bad. Everybody in that classroom knows who the smartest person in the classroom. Everybody in the classroom knows who the dumbest person is, right? Am I kidding?
Yeah, you're right about that.
I mean, that's just the way it is. When you're immersed in a group like that and you've been around for a while, everybody knows what's going on. It's one of those kind of things. Okay, we ready for number one?
We are.
The number one.
I mean, it takes a lot to bump Eric Schmitt out of number one. If he's on with Jake Tapper and Laura Ingraham, and he's on Reardon, and he's doing all this media. But there is a great story, Brad, that comes straight out of Missouri. And it is of all the stories about the folks that Trump has considered and is considering for Missouri Post. A great piece of news yesterday. A wonderful Missourian, a great Missourian named Billy Long will now be heading the Internal Revenue Service. Billy Long, former congressman, is in charge of the IRS, Brad. Did you see this yesterday?
I did not. Billy Long, the auctioneer extraordinaire, is going to be head of the IRS?
He is the head of the IRS now, Brad. So Billy Long, as you mentioned, was an auctioneer, ran an auctioneer business, a nationwide auctioneer business for years, and has a great deal of business experience. And yeah, it's just amazing. I would also point out my favorite part of the story, though, Brad, is that Billy Long claims that he was the first congressman to get aboard the Trump train. He also says that he invented the term Trump train in 2015. So he's been longtime loyal to Donald Trump, one of his biggest cheerleaders, one of his biggest allies in Congress, and, of course, throughout the tumult of the last 8 years. And yeah, so Billy Long will now be heading the IRS. You mentioned yesterday, Brad, the spirit that seems to, the esprit de corps that seems to be going on in the fact that some of these government things may really be changing. When you have a guy like Billy Long, who I think I'm not speaking for Billy Long here, but I would suggest that his approach to the IRS is that the IRS can go to hell and the IRS can stick it. Now leading the IRS, just fantastic, Brad. I just can't wait to see what he does.
Well, I hope we're not disappointed 6 months or a year in where it's like the SOS kind of stuff we deal with. But there seems to be, the interesting thing for me, I really haven't talked about this much. Remember, there's all sorts of things. There were actually pictures. I saw pictures of in certain cities that were boarding up the downtown businesses with the glass windows because if Trump would get elected, there's going to be riots. Nothing happened. Not one single thing. Go back to when he was elected in 2016. There's that was the start of, wasn't the 2016 the start of the pink vaginal hat movement? Wasn't that how that whole thing started?
Yeah, the yarn vaginas that they wear on their head. Yeah.
Right. And that was the classic one where Madonna stood on the stage and she says, I'm going to blow up the White House. Now, here's what's interesting. If John Combest or Brad Hildebrand would come on the air here and say, I'm going to blow up the White House, we would probably be within a few hours have a visit from the Secret Service guys.
We'd have a little knock on the door, Brad.
Right.
And before we get a little too cisgender here, I'm sure you're aware of the fact that you can't wear the yarn vaginas anymore. Those are passé. You know that story, right?
I don't. Do I want to know the story?
Yeah. The reason why you haven't seen the pink, we can't say the word on the air, but the yarn vagina hats. The reason why those went out of vogue is because not all women have vaginas, Brad. I'm serious, and I've linked the stories about this on my website that had quotes from Missouri people, because when women rally and they wear the vagina hats, that suggests that being a woman is equivalent to having a vagina, which leads out all the women who have male genitalia. So that's why you don't see those hats anymore, Brad.
Are you serious?
I'm 100% serious. Yeah,
that's the real reason.
Look at every of these. You look at the Amendment 3 rallies this year. Not a single yarn-vagina hat in sight because they're very cisgender, Brad.
Did you by any chance listen to any of the pleadings in front of the Supreme Court for the transgender thing? Did you listen to that at all?
I did not. No.
Man, I have to tell you what. You know, it would be like me saying, I love McDonald's because they have such great T-bone steaks, and their prime rib is so good at McDonald's. And oh my God, the asparagus they have at McDonald's, oh, it's so good. And
it's so good.
And someone would say, what the hell are you talking about? They don't have that at McDonald's. Oh, you don't know. You don't know about McDonald's. It's to the point where it's like I don't get what they're saying. It makes, it's interesting. You listen to Armstrong and Getty. We're on the air right after us. Sometimes Jack and Joe come up with very good analogies. And one of their analogies was, what if you were a parent and you took your kid to the pediatrician and you, with a straight face, you said to the pediatrician, I would like to have my son or my daughter's thumbs cut off. And the pediatrician says, what? Yeah, I want their thumbs amputated. Well, why would you want their thumbs amputated? Well, I don't think that because of the fact that differentiates, because if human, what do you call it?
Physiology.
No, what's the thing where we're the only the thing that makes us different?
That has opposable thumbs.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the only differentiating thing between us and a bonobo.
Okay, so I don't want my son or daughter to be differentiated from other mammals in the universe. I want them to be just like the other mammals in the universe with non-opposable thumbs. And the pediatrician would say, you know what, I'm going to give you 10 seconds to get your butt out of my office because that would be harming your child for life, right? But yet,
absolutely.
That's the point they made. The point they made is if your son or daughter at 18 decides they want to, do it themselves or go to the corner thumb, extraction store that started up, oh, everybody get their thumbs cut off, that would be great. And to the point where there's no doctor in the world that would do that. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's probably some quack that paid him enough. Oh, yeah, to get your kid's thumbs off. Who needs those thumbs anyway? They talk about, that way he can't ever hitchhike. Think about that. He can't ever hitchhike. You like that, John?
Yeah, I love that. Okay. I mean, I'm just glad that you're promoting meat once again after you signed Stelmacki's as an advertiser.
John, these North County mentions. Did you shop there by any chance?
No, I didn't I didn't go to Stelmacki's, and it wasn't that close to where we were. We were closer to. Do you remember Barlbort's?
Oh yeah, Barlbort.
And then we were real close to Northdale Market, which was right there on the corner of that would be Trampy and Larimore. So my mom got most of the meat. At Northdale, and then would occasionally go to Barlbort's. But I think Barlbort's was a little expensive.
But being the fact that I lived on Claudine, the location of the Hazelwood East beatdown, and we could just drive down to the end of Claudine where the beatdown occurred, and we could jump on, back in the day, it wasn't even called 367, I think it was just called Lewis and Clark Boulevard, if not mistaken.
Yeah, head right down to Stelmacki.
Exactly. We'd just go under 270, and we would go, I think it was like the first exit you can make off of 270, was it? Wasn't Chambers the first?
Yeah, I think it's right there.
Yeah. So we'd go down. Many a time that my mom would always want me to go, Mom, can I? And here's Brad. This is where my beginnings came from. I said, Mom, can I just sit here in the car and listen to the radio? So, honest to God, that's what I do. I'd sit in the car and listen to the radio. Now, what's interesting about that is today she would have been arrested because just like that poor lady that got arrested because her son walked, 2 miles to the Dollar General store or something like that.
Yes.
I mean, here we go. Okay, we have to take a break.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?